We are at the former West Virginia Penitentiary. This place was established in 1866. It closed in March of 1995. It was in operation for 129 years, and when it closed down in March of 1995, it was still the home for about 650 of the state's worst inmates. This prison was classified as a maximum security penitentiary. Most of the inmates that they had here, they moved down to Fayette County, West Virginia, to the Mount Olive Correctional Facility, and that was the prison that they built to replace this one with. Some of the men, they moved to a place called Moundsville, West Virginia, which is a medium security prison, and the rest of the inmates that they had here, they moved right outside of town to the new Northern Regional Correctional Facility. Service.
Yeah. So why did they close down?
They actually closed the prison down because back in the mid-1980s, the inmates were going through a time period where they were complaining about the living conditions here at the prison. And it actually got to the point where they filed a class action lawsuit against the state of West Virginia for the living conditions. To settle the lawsuit, they deemed that it was more feasible to build a new prison from the ground up rather than to renovate this one over to the standards that it needed to be. That was in 1986. It took 9 years to get the new one up and built and in operation.
Wow.
Yeah, that is the electric chair that was used here from 1951 to 1959. There was 9 men who lost their life in that chair. Prior to that, there were 85 hangings that took place here.
Wow.
Back in 1963, the country of America, they abolished the death penalty. Since then, 38 states have reinstated it. But West Virginia is still one of the 12 states that does not have a death penalty. Well, I used to have a different business that I operated. It was a seasonal business. It was busy in the winter months and it was slow in the summer months. And I happened to be an acquaintance of one of the board of directors here, and they were needing tour guides, and they thought that I might fit that position okay, so I came here as a tour guide back in the year of 2000, and I was a tour guide for 4 or 5 years, and then the person that has the job that I have now, the manager of this place, they let that person go, and they actually addressed me and asked me if I'd be interested in taking that position, and I took it, and I've been doing that ever since. But I actually came here just to be a tour guide.
Oh, so you didn't work here when this was open?
I was not here when this place was open. I did have some very close family members who did work here. So I kind of was intrigued by this place when I came here. I like history. I enjoy studying history. I enjoy relating history to other people when they're interested. So being a tour guide was kind of a natural fit for me. I read as much as I could read, and I questioned and tried to find out on a personal note about the history and about the operation of this facility. As I said, I had very close family members. I questioned them and bugged them as much as I could, but anybody that I came in contact to that did have dealings with the prison, I questioned and tried to find out as much as I could. I like the history to be presented to the public, but I'm a stickler that it has to be credible history. I don't want the tour guides just going out and fabricating stories and so forth about the prison. The prison has enough stories and enough credibility to itself that it tells its own story. And that's what I want my tour guides to do, is to relate the history in such a way that it's factual and people can, when they leave here, can take that with them.
So I shouldn't ask you about ghost stories?
What's that?
I shouldn't ask you about ghost stories then?
You can ask me about ghost stories?
Yeah.
Oh, there are ghost stories. There are stories of inmates' lives here. There's stories of guards who worked here or officers who used to work here. The paranormal part of the prison, the history of the prison, started back in around the year of 1999 to the year 2000, when MTV came here and filmed their first episode of Fear. It was their inaugural episode. It was a very successful show for them, and it stirred the pot as far as paranormal activity in this prison for us. We took that and we started selling that. And I don't mean selling the episode, I mean selling the paranormal aspect of the prison. We started doing night tours and ghost hunts and so forth here at the prison. It became very popular, and it is a very strong part of our business yet today. We sell night tours to the general public, and we also sell night tours privately. It has become a very valuable part of our business here at the prison. We've had multiple TV shows come here and film about the paranormal. They've all done their episodes here, and everyone that has filmed here has found credible evidence that the place is haunted.
Wow.
So we've had like the ghost hunters and the ghost stories, the ghost labs, the ghost adventures. They've all been here and filmed, and they've all found credible evidence.
Do you have any of your own stories?
Actually, I do have a couple of stories that of the 17 to 18 years that I've been here. I was here about 7 years, and really I'd tried multiple times to find something on my own and so forth, and never really did. I was kind of skeptical about the whole, but we did have one time back in about the year 2007 or so. I forget the exact year, but it was around that. I'd been here 6 or 7 years. There was a group that had been here filming. They were filming for paranormal stuff. They were going to be here for about a week, and it was about the middle of the week. In fact, it was on a Wednesday night. They were filming all night long. They had borrowed the monitor from my computer and had hooked some cameras to it and had it sitting out here in the hallway where we're at now, out here behind us. The cameras was out in the yard. About halfway through the night, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and there's my phone. There's the guy. Anyway, they had hooked cameras to my monitor, and about the middle of the night, 2 or 3 in the morning, it had stormed all night long, and they got to the point where there was so much noise with thunder and so forth that they decided to call it a wrap. They told a young guy to come down and unhook my monitor and put it back in the office. So I came down with him to unlock my office. He went over to the monitor and looked, and he says, "Wow," he says, "look at all the activity on this monitor." I went over and looked, and there was this light moving around on the monitor. So him and I watched it, and then a few minutes went by, and a few more people came down. There was about 5 or 6 of us watching this. And like I said, it was raining really hard, but one of the guys says, "I'm going outside where the cameras are at and see if we can see it with the naked eye." So we went outside, it was in the rain, and there was a light. There was a light right out here in the yard where the cameras were. It was about 3 or 4 inches in diameter. It was about 30 inches, maybe 3 foot long. It was like a long cylinder type light. And it was moving around out there in the yard. And we watched that. We watched that for several moments. And then eventually the light went over against a wall, and there's a set of stairs that goes down into the basement. And that light just went step by step by step down into the basement and moved inside the basement. We watched that for several moments, and it wasn't just myself, but I was there. There was about 5 or 6 of us that saw that. That was one experience that I had. The second experience I had was just actually a few months after that. We were building the haunted house that we have here in the fall each year. And I was actually in the basement down underneath where we're standing now in a place called the Sugar Shack. And I was, we were doing some construction and so forth, and I was walking along by myself. I had my several tools in my hands, and I was walking along in the dark, and I felt just a presence on my shoulder, like something was telling me, stop, don't go any further. Something actually pushed on my shoulder and stopped me. It startled me. I thought maybe I'd bumped into something, and I put the tools down and went around and turned the breakers on, and it was just a big wide open. There was nothing there for me to bump into, but I actually felt a presence on my shoulder. That's the two experiences that I've had, but I've talked to multiple people who have been here, who have experienced similar things, seeing things. I've seen pictures. I've had people, claim that, they've been touched, they've had their hair pulled, and multiple pictures that I have seen of apparitions that are just, you can't explain. We'll step out here into the hallway.
This is scary.
We'll take a walk down here and show you the cell block.
When there are no students and no teachers.
You know what? That's exactly it. This
Was that what it was?
Yeah.
You all.
This is what is known as New Wall Cell Block. This is the largest cell block in the prison. This was where mainline population lived in 1995. It actually starts right here and it ends way down there. There's 160 cells on this side and there's 160 cells behind them facing the street on the other side.
How many people would be in each cell?
Normally one, but oftentimes two. As you can see, there's two bunks in that cell. But actually, there was a time period back in the early 1960s where they had over 2,000 inmates here, and there was as many as 3 inmates to a cell.
Whoa.
You had the 2 bunks, and the third guy got a mattress on the floor.
What determined whether they got a toilet in their cell?
They all had toilets in their cells. Just some of them have been taken out since, but they all had toilets and a sink in their cell.
Is this over here?
That's the shower. That was the shower for this whole section, where as many as 9 inmates at a time would come down and shower up.
Felt like I'm in basic training.
Did they get to choose when they did?
No.
No?
No. They were always told and instructed when they were going to shower, when they were going to eat, when they were going to be moved. No, inmates didn't just get to pick and choose.
When they left, did they have like a recreational time or?
Inmates over here in this cell block, this was mainline population. This was the inmates that was trying to do the time the right way.
Okay.
They were pretty much allowed out of their cells all day long. It was pretty much mandatory to be in your cells for sleeping hours unless there was a scheduled head count where everybody had to be in their cells. But during the day, during the time, they had things they could do. They had jobs they could go to inside the walls, over at the Industries building, or maybe working in the cafeteria or working in the laundry house, things like that. That would be an 8 to a 10-hour day job that they would go to. If they didn't have a high school education, they had an educational program where they could go to school and gain their high school education. Or they had a recreation yard where they could go outside for recreation. But that was pretty much during the daylight hours. When it got dark, everybody was in their cells.
So pretty much like when you see Attica on television, it's a lot like that too.
It's a lot like that. They portray those stories, those TV shows and documentaries. They portray that pretty real.
I agree with you. When you want to make sure something's told the right way, you want to make sure it's the right story, make sure it's the right history. So I think that's great that you do that. So
Where does this go?
That's just a trough. That's a trough for the water to run into. But when they would hose these cells out and clean them out, and the water would just run down into the trough and then drain out. So we can take a walk down and show you the cafeteria.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
You can look out the windows here at the recreation yard. These inmates that was in this cell block we were just at, this was their recreation yard out here. They had a chapel and they had the big field where they could play their ball games and do different things.
There's a school bus over there.
Yeah, that's just, they use that for training purposes. They do all kinds of training in here now. We'll stop right here real quick. This area here was used for visitation. This was for inmates that was allowed to have family members with them. This was called contact visitation. They could actually come in here and sit down at tables and chairs and so forth and have visitation with their family members. All the artwork and stuff that you see, wherever in the prison that you see artwork, it was all done by inmates.
Wow.
But this was all done in a real friendly type atmosphere because of their wives and children and so forth being here to visit with them. At one time, this was a cafeteria back until about 1988. This was a cafeteria. And New Year's Day, 1986, this cafeteria was the site of the start of the last major riot that took place here. The riot lasted approximately 52 hours, and they took 16 hostages, and they brutally murdered 3 of their own inmates. And it all started right here in this area where we're at now.
What's that?
Those were restrooms.
Oh, restroom.
They weren't like that when this was a visit. There were restrooms here, but we've tore them out and built those in there now, but there was a small area there that had restrooms in them. This is where the guard would have sat when it was a cafeteria. He would sit up there, the armed officer. You see the slots for his weapons, and he could look out over the whole cafeteria. After they built the new cafeteria, the guard would just sit at the door without a weapon because their family members and stuff would be in here with them when they were visiting. Now that riot that took place on New Year's Day 1986, one of their demands was to have a new cafeteria. And they'd taken 16 hostages. So in order to get the hostages released, the governor was in negotiation with the inmates. The governor back then was Arch Moore. He granted them a new cafeteria. So we're going to go down here and take a look at the new cafeteria that was built because of the riot that took place over here in this cafeteria.
Yeah, it looks like cafeteria.
This is the new cafeteria that was built because of the riot. Inmates ate over here in groups of about 85 to maybe 120 inmates at a time. And they were given just about a half an hour to come in the door and get their silverware and get their food and get a seat and get it ate. They sat at tables. You can see where these tables used to be bolted down. These were big stainless steel tables with seats molded into them and bolted to the floor.
Wow. I guess so no one could throw chairs.
What's that?
I guess so no one could throw chairs.
Exactly, because that's in the old cafeteria, the chairs were loose and those chairs became big weapons. The new cafeteria, they were all one piece and bolted to the floor. If the officers and staff came to work and didn't bring their lunch, they could come over here to the cafeteria and eat the same thing the inmates ate. If the staff ate here, they ate behind that wall where you see the truck painted on the wall.
How was the food, do you know?
The food was good. The different jobs that inmates did around the prison, they would rotate inmates around so they could learn different jobs, unless you were a good cook. If you were a good cook, you were pretty much permanently assigned in the kitchen. And they had some very good cooks here. They had a regular dietitian who who supervised all the work in the kitchen and supervised using all the knives and sharp cutlery and stuff. They had a menu. Their menu rotated like on a 10-day schedule, so they didn't eat the same thing every Monday and Tuesday. It had about a week and a half rotation.
Cool.
So, and they had some very good cooks here.
It's pretty nice. Was the penitentiary the largest employer of the city?
The city, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Of the city, yes. There were other places here. Fostoria Glass, which I don't know if it was a large, I would say it was pretty close to the large. I don't know if it would be exactly a large, because Fostoria Glass employed between 200 and 300 people. You had, at one time there was a stamping plant here where they made metal pans and stuff. They were here in town, and they employed so. But the prison was a prominent thing for industry here in the prison, in the state, and also in the city of Moundsville.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to take you down and show you North Hall cell block, and you'll see a big difference.
Okay.
Big difference. Now, this is what's known as North Hall cell block. This was a punishment cell block. This wasn't for the everyday inmate. This was for the guys that come in here and cause trouble, cause fights with the other inmates, or rob the other inmates, or try to do harm to the officers, or try to escape. They were sent up here to be punished. They were sent up here to be put in these cells for a minimum of 30 days. But they could be here for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days. It depended on what you did, and maybe if it was your first or second time doing it. They were put back here in this cell block, and they were put in their cells, and they spent 22 to 23 hours of every day in their cell. They were only allowed out about an hour and a half or maybe 2 hours to get a shower and to go outside for an hour, and that was it. They did everything else in their cells. They ate in their cells. They did everything in their cells. They were not. We'll go back here and show you these cells that these guys were housed in 22 hours a day.
These are tiny.
They look smaller.
They're actually pretty close to the same size. The only difference is that they're all closed off in the front. There's no open. There's mesh welded on the doors. There's steel panels across the front. They're pretty confined. This was pretty much what solitary confinement was.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh,
And there again is very, very cold up here. It had a little bit of heat over here that had to filter into those cells. You know, it wasn't like, it wasn't all open in the front where you got a lot of heat. You just got a little bit of heat through that mesh door, you know.
blankets were probably asked for all the time.
Yes.
At a premium.
They were fed through this little hole at the bottom of that door. That's where they got their meals. That's called the bean hole.
Makes sense.
It says rest in peace.
Oh, there's a lot of writing in this one.
I'm sure the inmates didn't do that.
Yes, they did.
They wrote that?
Yes,
Oh.
yeah, that's original graffiti.
Wow. I guess they liked the certain tiers. One was better than the other, I'm assuming. 1B tier rocks. I'm gonna guess I don't want to be on any tier. Wow, this is incredible.
Looks like some subrats have been. Ooh, creepy.
Now I'm going to give you a little paranormal story here.
Okay, good.
These 4 cells right here, these 4 cells on this upper end, these 4 cells were classified for the 4 worst of the troublemakers.
Okay,
They were isolated down even from the bad guys.
okay.
They built this partition with a gate and lock on it. They built a separate shower stall for these 4 guys to get cleaned up in. It was right here.
Okay.
But these 4 cells, one day they unlocked these 4 cells. They were going to take them outside for recreation. And the inmate in this second cell, his nickname was Rusty. He ran past the officer and ran into the end cell and stabbed Red Snyder 37 times and killed him in his own cell before the officers could get him stopped. Now, I don't know how quickly that the officer was even trying to stop him, because he's probably fearing for his own life about that point. But Red Snyder is one of the strong paranormal energies that is captured and felt up here all the time.
And he was the one that was killed.
He was the one that was killed. He was in this end cell down here. Red Snyder was probably the most powerful inmate that was here.
This cell?
Yes, Red was the type of guy, if he wanted you dead, all he had to do was say, "You're a dead man," and somebody's going to take you out. But his voice, his energy, there's been many people capture things in that cell with paranormal.
The air is like weirdly thick. Like around your head. You stick your head in.
Well, I'm not going to do that. Let's take a picture in here.
Also, I think he was a Nazi.
Well,
He was a leader of the Aryan Brotherhood here at the prison, which is a spin-off of the Nazis. It's a white supremacy group.
That's enough for me to say.
This is what's known as the wheelhouse. The wheelhouse was actually installed in 1894. And when it was installed, it was the second one in the world. There was one in the prison. There was one in the prison over in London, and this was the second one. And what it does, it allows for one way in and out of the prison. When this place was first constructed, there were only 2 ways in and out of the prison. You had this way, and you had the north wagon gate up here on the end, where they would bring in wagon loads of materials and supplies and so forth. But this was a very unique system. It was very secure from the inside going out. If I wanted to get onto that thing, there was no way I was going to unlock it and let anybody onto it. It had to be unlocked by the officer on the other side. He had to ride it around and put the big key in the door, and you can see it took a pretty good sized key to unlock that.
Oh, yeah.
But you would be locked onto that thing, and then the officer on the other side, he controlled it. Back in the 1800s, they did that with cables and pulleys. Eventually, they installed a big electric motor underneath of it. I can't turn it very far, it's got all locked down, but this would be revolved around until that matched up on the other side, and then it'd be unlocked and you could go out. This is how every guard, every officer used to come to work. Every new inmate, when he came here, the first thing he did was
Go through there.
go through the wheel. Even the warden, if the warden wanted into the prison, the warden lived upstairs, and he had to come down the stairs on the other side and get on the wheel and ride it around and get off right here. It's a pretty neat structure for the 1800s. It's phenomenal, the amount of stories and the different pictures and stuff that I've seen and heard over the years. It's crazy, crazy.
Yeah, but do you think they're having these experiences because there are ghosts, or because they're expecting to have the experience?
Well, you know, the human mind can play a large part on how someone feels and what they see. You know, I get that. But the cameras, the pictures and stuff that I've seen on camera,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable.